Scar tissue, the proof of an overcomer. Isaiah 41, verse 10 through 13 says this: Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they that strive with thee shall perish. Thou shalt seek thee and shalt not find them. Even them that contend with thee, they that war against thee shall be as nothing, and as a thing of naught. For I, the Lord, thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help them. In Isaiah chapter 45, verse 2 and 3, I want to use this as my support scripture. It says this: I will go before thee and make the crooked places straight. I will break into pieces the gates of brass and cut in sunder the bars of iron. And I will give thee the treasures of darkness, get this, and hidden riches of secret places, that thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which called thee by thy name, am the God of Israel. Now, I titled what I want to talk to you about scar tissue, the proof of an overcomer. And I titled this because after all of this coronavirus pandemic stuff is over, the mark of overcomer is going to metaphorically be stamped on the heads of those who put their trust in God. In our text, here in Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10 through 13, the hermeneutic doesn't actually begin here. It starts 2 verses prior in verse 8 and 9. And I bring out the distinction because in order for me to do my due diligence, which is to derive my argument from the writer's intent, as well as to stay true towards the integrity of the text, I have to begin with verse 8, which is a conjunction, and then I'll piece everything else together and present what God has for us. Amen? So enough with the disclosure. In verse 8 and 9 of Isaiah chapter 41, God says, But thou, Israel, art my servant Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham my friend, thou whom I have taken from the ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto them, Thou art my servant, I have chosen thee. Notice he says servant twice. Once in verse 8 and then again in verse 9. This means that it has to be of importance, because if God takes the time to say something twice, it's important. Well, even though the word servant is used twice, here is that distinction. Before Jacob's name was changed, God called him chosen. But when his name was changed to Israel, he was now called a servant, which is distinctively different, and here's why. To be a servant involves the active decision to do the will of the one who you serve, while being chosen is the status of being graciously selected by the one doing the choosing. And you got to get this. See, if I'm the one being chosen, then this implies that the one making the choice values what I have to bring to the table. This is what I call the significance of an adoption. To be born into a family involves no choice, but to be adopted means that I was handpicked out of all of those who could have been selected. Well, even though many of us might not deserve or have even earned the right to be chosen, because God made a choice to choose us makes us absolutely significant. Why, you ask? Because who or what can question God's reasons or even change his mind about the one he chooses? So right where you are, tell yourself, I was handpicked by the right hand of the Father twice, and then chosen as his servant. Not because I earned special privileges, gotta get that, but because being chosen to be God's servant indicates both a close possessive relationship as well as a purposeful desire to employ the servant in the fulfillment of the master's plan. And the best part of it, my friends, is there ain't nothing anyone can do about it. Somebody say scar tissue, the proof of an overcomer. In our text, in Isaiah 41, verse 10, it starts off by saying, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee," which is not only plain in its meaning, in other words, full of consolation, but these words were to be regarded primarily to exiled Jews during their long and painful captivity in Babylon. The idea here is that they who had been selected by God to be his special people had nothing to fear. It says, "For I am with thee," which is an emphatic term, and the primary reason why they then and we today have no reason to be fearful going forward. Because if God is our protector, then of whom should we be afraid? Come on. If God be for us, Romans 8 and 31 says, then who, or I want to say what, can be against us? I mean, what higher consolation can man desire than the assurance that God is with us to protect us? This is why the verse says, "Be not dismayed." The word dismayed here is tishta, which is derived from the word sha'a, meaning to see or to look as one does in a state of alarm or danger. The emphasis here is that you can stay calm and be under no evasive apprehension from your foes. Why? Because the next statement, "For I am thy God," is the precursor to your ability to overcome. In fact, if you don't get anything from what I say today, get this. Whenever God says, "For I am," this is the most authoritative statement that he could ever make, because this statement literally means to remain. It means to stand, to exist, to live, to survive, to coexist, and it means to happen. And every other verb the English language can use to describe him as God. And so, just like verse 8 and 9 brings our attention to this fact, this is also why I laid the foundation first. Because, like I said at the beginning of this message a few moments ago, after this, what's going to empower us to withstand the onslaught that is waged against our faith, our health, and our family, my friends, will depend on your adherence to that which is found in the next statement of verse 10 that I couldn't wait to get to, which speaks to the ability to overcome and prove to all opposition that you have been chosen to live and not die and fulfill your God-given purpose. So let me show you this thing. Notice the repetition in verse 10 and 13 where it talks about the right hand of God. Now, remember we said earlier that if God repeats himself, it's of great importance. Remember we said that? Well, the first time God says this, he says in verse 10, "the right hand of my righteousness." And then in verse 13, he says, "For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee." See, when it comes to being an overcomer, you can only become an overcomer, which means to survive forceful advancements, meaning you can only survive based on the level of knowledge that your righteousness reveals to you. That's why the verse refers to the right hand. Listen, the phrase here is a Hebrew mode of expression that not only means that God's hands are always faithful, but they could be relied on to secure those who were under captivity. You gotta get this. Hands also means authority. And because it points directly to the right hand, it indicates God's permission, get this, to exercise spiritual dominance over natural defiance. Any natural defiance. That's why it says in Psalm 73 and 23, "Nevertheless, I am continually with thee. Thou hast holden me by my right hand." Exodus 15 and 6 says, "Thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces the enemy." Acts 23 in the New Testament says, "Therefore, being by the right hand of God exalted, and having received of the Father the promise of the Holy Ghost, he hath set forth this, which ye now see and hear." And then in 1 Peter 3 and 22, it says this, who is gone into heaven and is on the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers being made subject unto him. So when God said in verse 3 here in Isaiah 45, and I will give thee the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places. The word darkness here means that which was hidden, unknown, and secret. See, the treasures of the kings of the east were usually hidden in obscure fortified places and were not to be touched except in cases of, pressing necessity. Well, how many of you know that those times have also returned? There are some hidden vaccines, things, I hope they don't take this video down, that average folks don't have access to that others do. So what our text here is saying is that God was going to cause Israel's captives to know that I, the Lord, which called thee by name, am the God of Israel. Come on, somebody. And he was going to do it through what he calls, get this, the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places. Or simply through what I call hidden scar tissue that is revealed on the hands of God's chosen. In other words, through the wounds of our past battles. We are going to prove, my friends, after all this is over, that even though we might have taken some injuries in the battle, it was God who brought us through every one of them. And I can prove it. Remember in Luke 24, verse 36 through 40, where Jesus entered into the room where his disciples, with exception to Judas, were hidden. Remember that? It says, as they thus spoke, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and saith unto them, peace be unto you. Now, they had just come out of the worst pandemic in history, called the cross, where Christians were afraid to leave their homes for fear of death, hidden behind masks of potential recognition. It says in verse 37, but they were terrified and affrighted, and supposed that they had seen a spirit. Verse 38 says, and he said unto them, why are you troubled? And why do thoughts arise in your hearts? Behold, my hands and my feet, that it is I, myself. He said, handle me. And see, for a spirit have not flesh and bone, as ye see me have. Verse 40 says, and when he had thus spoken, he showed them his hands and his feet. I wish I could get my feet up on this table. In other words, scar tissue, where the nails that pierced his flesh, once occupied, now healed, as proof and a reminder that the one standing before them is truly an overcomer. Because that's what scar tissue is. They're wounded reminders that says to those who question if you got what it takes to carry out God's purpose for your life, that once this thing is over, we're coming out of hiding. God has given thee the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places. Verse 45 and 46 says, then opened he their understanding, that they might understand the scriptures, and said unto them, thus it is written, and thus it behoved Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day. So listen, it was his scar tissue that proved that he was an overcomer. His scar tissue proved that not only was the one standing before them the same Jesus who hung on the cross and died, but everything they tried to do to negate the identity of who he was by trying to assassinate his character and purpose would come up short. Who he is could no longer be refuted. He had the scar tissue to prove it. And saints of God, what's going to break through the forces of the enemy in these last days to come is not going to come from a vaccine, face mask, rubber gloves, or because of your adherence to social distancing. Your ability to overcome is going to come from the wounds that God would not allow to kill you on your way to your destiny. Come on, anybody got any scar tissue on your right hand that God wouldn't allow to destroy you? I'm talking about deep wounds and gashes that should have maimed you or even taken you out. Well, now you can use them to prove that if it wasn't for God on your side, come on somebody, just from the fact that there is scar tissue means that healing is the glory that's going to come out of whatever came to you to take you out. Come on, show me your wounds. You have been chosen to overcome. God needs real, true men and women of God who will convince this world that the person standing before them took some hits, but we're still here. And because you have scar tissue, doesn't mean you failed. It means you qualify to go before thee and make the crooked places straight. You have been empowered to break in pieces the gates of brass and cut in sunder the bars of iron. Our text in Isaiah 41, 10 through 13 says, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they that strive with thee shall perish. Thou shalt seek them, and shalt not find them, even them that contend with thee. They that war against thee shall be as nothing, and as a thing of naught." Verse 13 says, "For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee." Your testimonial wounds, people of God, are the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places that this world is looking for. If they're ever going to find their way to Christ, then they are going to have to find him in the healed wounds and scar tissue that proves that we have been chosen in the days to come to represent Christ. Scar tissue, the proof of an overcomer. Until next time, God bless you. Stay safe.